Welcome to our webinar today on delivery. And delivery is a hot topic in the industry. And today's webinar will show you an agenda and make some introductions. We'll be able to get into some of the pros and cons on delivery. And a reminder for those of you who are not aware of it, Franchise Times Magazine is sponsoring a Food on Demand conference coming up here in Dallas, which I will be attending and presenting. And it's because, as you can see, it is a $30 billion industry, and there's a reason for that and growing. So, on today's webinar, besides myself, my name is Fred LeFranc. I'm the founder of Results for Strategy. My title is Chaos Strategist because we live in a disruptive world where there is a lot of chaos. As you all know, we're a tweet away from disaster, and everyone's on edge. And trying to figure out what to do in these turbulent times can be challenging. I'm going to let my partner, Deb Jones, introduce herself. She's, as it says here, she's awesome when it comes to operations and catering. But Deb, give us your background and we'll get started.
Sure. Thanks, Fred. Really, my background is my whole life has been in the restaurant industry. I've always worked in operations and worked for McDonald's Corporation for 30-some years, starting in high school, and then got an opportunity. Most of that was spent in Florida. Got an opportunity to relocate to oversee restaurants in the Southeast, and so I relocated to North Carolina, and then really just decided to kind of slow things down a little bit. I'm not sure that happened, but then partnered up with Fred with RTS, and have been with RTS for the last few years doing restaurant consulting. Excellent.
All right, well, let's get into it and see what we have to talk about today. So our agenda is as follows. We're going to go over just some delivery facts and stats so you can get a sense of what's happened over the last few years. And it's amazing that this category of business and revenue channel has grown so immensely so quickly. Then we're going to review some of the reasons you should consider delivery if you're not having it currently. And then just briefly talk about whether you should use a third party or in-house. And that's a big controversial issue. And there's a lot of pros and cons on this because while delivery is definitely accretive to sales, we see there's some other challenges there. Then we'll quickly go into the importance of to-go packaging, especially if you're going to use a third-party delivery, because you're putting your brand in the hands of somebody else. And then we're going to talk about some of the technology, and this keeps on evolving. That's one of the reasons I recommend you might consider attending the Food on Demand conference, because there's some new technologies that are becoming available. And then as far as questions go, we'll do a quick Q&A at the end. But if you have a question at all throughout the panel, feel free to go on the right-hand side of your screen where you logged into the GoToWebinar. There is a little section that says questions. Click on that button, and you can type your question in, and as appropriate, we'll look at it and definitely ask it live, and then try and give you some quick responses. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Dad, let's give us some facts and some stats so we see what's happening here.
Sure. Yeah. Today, when you look at the takeout and delivery as a whole, today there's, when restaurants are doing it right, they've got an opportunity for 20% and even higher growth when they really, really do a great job doing it. The delivery market today for the restaurant for food and beverage is $52.2 billion in industry. In 2016, third-party delivery was $3.7 billion and growing. Today 56% is pretty much on premise, 44% is off premise, and which is a huge industry. But when you look at today's consumers, 4 out of 10 are using delivery at least one time per month, and that number continues to grow across the industry itself.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is the delivery includes your B2B, which would be considered more catering, let's say, where you're having food delivered to an office meeting, law firm, whatever the case would be. I'm sure many of you have tried it. And then there's the B2C, which the consumer's getting it delivered at home. Now, let's face it, this is not a new industry. Pizza has been doing this for years, decades. And as we've seen through the reemergence of Domino's, Domino's is not a tech company that serves food because of the backbone of technology. And that's what's really transforming this category is the use of technology, the accessibility through smartphones, and the consumers ever need to have more convenience because of the time crunch they're faced. So let's find out what people want.
Yeah, Fred, you really just mentioned that customers want delivery. They want convenience, and more importantly, they're willing to pay the cost for it. Today's trends, this was an article recently in the Medium around the 2018 trends that you can see today. Certainly technology is going to be instrumental to automate food delivery. It's critical in the industry itself. You've got route optimization. So it's going to be critical for drivers to be able to follow their routes efficiently and effective and be fast at their delivery times. Today when I think about the local Uber rides that I take, today there's many times that I've actually gone out on route. The driver takes you on a route that I would have never thought of going. And that's a lot due to the technology that they're using in their routes. They're looking for ease of services. More restaurants are going to choose to deliver food on demand. Everyone on this webinar is a great example of that interest today. And then you look at the reward base. So the trend of integrating online ordering solutions, the software with the management of the software, all of that's important, including the rewards programs. So you think about the folks using their credit cards to get their point structure and even the airline miles, all of that being integrated today into the software with delivery is going to be important. And then, certainly restaurants are going to focus on their strategies for how do they scale and how do they grow their brands. And ultimately, everybody's looking at delivery today as a part of that, one of those arms and avenues.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Deb. And when we get to technology, we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in that technology space, because while the technologies enable delivery to be a bigger component of one's business, technology in and of itself is changing dramatically. We need to be aware of that. So the one thing to keep in mind is that the space is crowded. And I want to give you some statistics. In like the mid-1890s, we're going way back in time, there were 250 car companies in the United States. Now, for those of us alive today, that makes no sense because we only think of the big three in the US and, of course, some of the international players. But it was an era of innovation and disruption and a lot of flow through. And what we have here is a lot of different delivery companies fighting for space. The dirty little secret is that no one's making money in this category. You've got a lot of PE firms who are investing millions of dollars into this category to see which one wins. And we'll talk a little bit later on about who seems to be the lead dog. And the other thing we're going to find out is that not everyone is ubiquitous. If you're a restaurant company in multi-cities and multi-states, you're going to be dealing with possibly dozens of delivery companies. You will not be dealing with one primary one, regardless of what you may be reading. And in the middle of this delivery space, you also have the direct-to-consumer prepared meals, which you're maybe familiar with, like Blue Apron and Munchery and Spring, as it says here. And then restaurant chains are doing delivery for themselves. And don't discount what's happening with supermarkets. Supermarkets themselves are also getting into the delivery game. So there's a lot of noise in the industry, and it's going to be a while before it flushes out. And that's part of what we have to deal with here. Deb, walk us through this statistic here.
Yeah, this is a slide that I like a lot, and it talks about who's winning from a delivery service in individual cities, and these are some of the top cities where food delivery is happening today. But Grubhub's a clear market share winner. Here they acquired Seamless. They recently acquired Yelp's Eat24, and then not to mention the $200 million investment from Yum Brands recently into their business. But you can see the individual folks here from a brand standpoint or a vendor standpoint with their party. But ultimately the market is still fractured. There's a lot of people out there trying to do delivery and fight for delivery, and these are just some of the top ones today. Uber Eats landed the McDonald's contract across the U.S. Today, McDonald's deliveries, 60% of their delivery orders are happening from 4 p.m. and later into the evening. This is a day part that McDonald's really, really struggled to get consumers in the door. They were great at breakfast, great at lunch, and then that dinner time always dropped off. But now they're seeing sales rising with the addition of the deliveries, especially during the dinner day part. But it's important to understand that when you're choosing a vendor, just one vendor isn't necessarily always the whole answer. You got to think about the consumer, who's using the brand the most in your area, and what apps are they using on their phone. But it's critical to make sure that you think about who are your top delivery vendors out there, and then what fits best, so that you're capturing the most of those consumers that are out there wanting food on demand.
Yeah, it's a good point. I had the CEO of Craftworks on a delivery panel at the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference, and they've got 3 or 4 brands. But when I asked them how many delivery companies he works with, it was over 2 dozen. And that's mind-boggling, because for those of you who have delivery, you may know this already, you get a tablet from all of them. So you can only imagine how many tablets. We're going to show you a screenshot later on of what it looks like at some of these poor POS stations to deal with all these companies. And the reason is because of this fragmentation in the marketplace in terms of who's big and who's powerful, and you have to learn how to deal with all of them. And they will not all deal with you in the same manner. And that's part of what you have to educate yourself on. So let's move in a little bit more in terms of better understanding what's going on with this delivery markets. So as you can see here, people are generally happy with what's going on with delivery because of the convenience. And keep in mind, there are still issues with this, because, you know, how many times have you been in a restaurant and they get your order wrong? Well, that's not too bad when you're about 50 feet from the kitchen. When you're 5 miles from the kitchen, that becomes a bigger issue. The things to keep in mind is that the fees for these things can be expensive. And while it says here that the average is about 13.5% commission, the reality is that most companies are charging 20 to 30% commission or some other form of profit margins. And when you start looking at the mathematics of restaurants, keep in mind that if you have a 40% flow-through rate on an incremental dollar and you're paying out a 30% commission, in fact, you basically might have maybe 10% gross profit left over to sort of take care of what your business is going to be. And also, we recognize that people are hungry for delivery exactly the same time they're hungry to be in your restaurant. So there's a lot of implications here in terms of what you need to be done. But as it says in the last bullet point, 76% of consumers polled hold restaurants responsible for errors, not the delivery company. And so the error might be yours in making the preparation, but the error might be the food's cold, it took too long, whatever the case may be. And that's a big concern. But let's get into the question about why delivery. What are we going to try and do here? So Deb, let's walk through what the benefits are in terms of considering delivery.
Sure. Today, you know, dining in is the new dining out. You know, NPD has projected that 50% of dinners purchased from restaurants are going to be consumed at home today. So, and that number continues to grow as well. You know, it's the most popular place now is eating at home. So when you think about also digital ordering, it's posted a rapid growth in the last 5 years. You know, in 2013, it was 33%. Today's data shows us it's running around 53%. You know, so, you know, what makes the number interesting is that besides the delivery segment, there's no growth forecasted across the restaurant industry. So today, restaurateurs are trying to figure out, okay, where do I drive business and more business today? And certainly the delivery model is one of those things. You know, chains in particular, you know, have to react to the user trends and step up in their delivery efforts because the data is there and certainly more consumers are using it. You know, speed and convenience are also two major driving forces. You know, when you look at the shift in consumer behavior and technology, is certainly being the enabler to make it happen in 2018 and beyond.
No, and there's some good points there. And we see that we've had some people join us late. Just to remind you all that you will have availability for this entire webinar. So if you missed the first part of it, you'll be able to catch up once we send you on the link for the replay of this. And of course, this webinar, along with all our other webinars, are available on our website. So keep that in mind. So let's get back to the delivery. And I think one of the key points here is, as Deb pointed out, is that there's really no growth in the restaurant business. If you look at the statistics, most of the increase in sales across the entire category is because of price increase, not because of traffic count. We have a lot of people fighting for share of stomach here, besides restaurants. And there's two categories to keep in mind here. That B2C I mentioned earlier, where you're serving a consumer, a business, B2B as opposed to B2C. When you're serving a business at lunch, that's not too bad. If you can get a couple $100 orders out of the door before you open up for lunch, that's great. And but if you've got a demand in the evening, as Deb pointed out about McDonald's, competing with your customers inside the restaurant, that becomes a bigger challenge. So let's figure out why should restaurants offer delivery? Go ahead, Deb.
I mean, ultimately, it's to boost sales. You know, the industry studies are estimating number of restaurants testing delivery today is at 80%. So many people are looking at it. You know, the numbers of meals being delivered as a percentage is growing double digits year after year. And certainly the potential customers, if they don't know who you are, they can't order from you. So it's critical to make sure, you know, that's a great avenue from a delivery perspective for consumers to realize who your brand is, what you've got out there to deliver, and try your product. So it's a great opportunity. But, you know, the other side of that is really the millennial and Gen Y consumers. You know, today there's 75 billion millennials, those 18 to 34-year-olds, which is a huge demographic today, and they're extremely important to the restaurant industry. The Gen Y, they're not about value, and they're all about value and convenience. They want instant accessibility, and cost for them isn't necessarily a factor. Those kind of consumers, they're gold mines for restaurants to delay today into delivery services. And, they're not loyal to one third-party delivery service. So, that's where I always say you got to consider more than one delivery service, because these guys they're checking them all out, and they're using the ones that they get the best service from. One of the other things I always talk about is, make sure that when you're looking at those contracts with those third-party vendors, make sure you check for exclusivity rights, because you don't want to get pigeonholed into one vendor. You want to be able to make sure that you're hitting all of your consumers. So something for you to consider with that as well. But there's certainly, consider partnering delivery platforms, provide consumers with those reward processes. Fred will talk about that in a couple minutes, but, everybody today is thinking about points, and millennials are certainly looking at that as a driving force in when they make their decisions.
So let's talk about some of the considerations to ask yourself for delivery. So the big one here is, does it work for your business model? And that's an important question, because obviously delivery involves to-go packaging. And in some cases, you may not have the capacity in your kitchen, especially at lunchtime, to have, a bunch of delivery orders going out at the same time, as we said earlier, as your regular in-house dining, but that may not be an issue for you. Really take a look at your menu and ask yourself, does my food travel well? There's nothing wrong with having a different delivery menu than what you serve in-house. The classic one is pasta. Lasagna travels great, spaghetti not so much. And do your own testing for yourself to see whether or not that quality of the food in a 10 or 15-minute delivery window is to the level that you really want it to do. And is your staff able to handle this additional amount of business and fluctuation of what's going on? And so, Deb, let me ask you this. What's more profitable, in-house or third-party delivery?
It's funny you ask that question, Fred, because the reality is they both work. You've got brands like Panera, Domino's, which has always delivered. You've got even Darden Restaurants is doing their own delivery in-house. But you got a lot of folks out there that are finding it more profitable for them in their current model today to deliver in-house. I just read an article. It was Marco Pizza, who is testing in Atlanta with their own delivery drivers. They're finding it easier to be able to get drivers using their own vehicles versus trying to find that person who uses their own vehicle to do delivery. They're finding it easier to get a younger age group to be able to come on board with them to be doing delivery. So there's a lot of restaurants also out there testing third brand, or they're doing it themselves. But when you look at also the amount of folks out there as third party, they're doing it as well. So, there isn't really one answer to which works best, but there's certainly pros and cons to each.
Well, we do know that doing it yourself is within your control. You can, make sure that you hire the right kind of people, you can put them in a uniform, et cetera, but you may not have the software and the logistics capability of third-party delivery companies that have millions of dollars being poured into their systems. But let's take a look a little bit about what the pros and cons are in terms of third-party delivery, and then later on we'll look at in-house.
Yeah, Fred, when you look at the pros side of it, it's really increased awareness of marketing, because you've got, that the apps that you're using, the online process, you've got a lot of things going on with that third-party delivery vendor that is able to really market your business as well. And then when you think about the incremental sales growth, that's a great opportunity for growing your business on the third-party level side. It's getting consumers that may not have thought about you before, and they're coming to that app to be able to try and place an order, either at home delivery or office delivery or whatever it may be. And one of the challenges, I mentioned it a couple minutes ago, was around fleet drivers. Today those third parties, they're the ones hiring the fleet drivers. They're the ones making sure that all of the insurance pieces, all of the registration stuff, background checks, things like that have already been done in those third parties. That kind of takes that out of the individual who's trying to do their own delivery. It takes that out of their hands, and they're not having to worry about that part. But as you can see here, there are pros to doing third-party delivery for sure in that arena.
Well, when you get to
How about the con spread?
the very first question I want to ask everyone who's doing delivery is, are you comfortable with the fact that you've lost the guest permanently? Now, when I do ask people, they kind of look at me, what do you mean by that? And here's what happens. When you're doing delivery by yourself and someone's calling your restaurant for the order, or even if you have it through a third-party app, that's your customer. As soon as you use a third-party delivery company, you've given that customer away to the third-party delivery company. Because here's what you lose. You lose the contact of who that person is. You may have the address, well, not even that. You wouldn't even have the address. You have no information about them other than the food order. So you don't know who that customer is that's ordering your food, how often they do it, what they spend, where they live, nothing like that. All you know is that an order came in, you got to fulfill it, someone's going to come in and pick it up for them. And so that customer now gets aggregated to a website that if you get onto the Postmates website or Grubhub or Uber Eats, you're not the only restaurant on there. It's a little bit like OpenTable. And what happens is that when the customer orders again next time they go to that third-party app, now they have a choice. And let's say there was a restaurant that I've never even heard of. They may say, hey, wait a minute, instead of my regular place, I'll try this one. The other thing to keep in mind is that these companies also can rank who shows up on that first screen in terms of who's paying them the greater percentage. And if you were a third-party delivery company and you want to buy a burger, or you want to get a consumer that's buying a burger, and someone's paying you 30% commission versus 20% commission, who do you think is going to show up at the top of the ranking? And these are the things that you need to be thinking about. Now, depending on your size, you can negotiate some access to some data, though most people will fight you tooth and nail because they know that data is key to really building a business over the long term. And that's something to think about. The rest of the things that we talked in here, we talked briefly about is the commissions, your loss of control. What does that driver look like? You don't have no idea. Now, they all theoretically have hot boxes to hold your food in, but is it in a condition you're going to want it in there? We'll talk a little bit more about to-go packaging and the risk to do there, but you're basically turning your brand over to a third party, and that's the consideration you want to try and have. The rest of the things you can read yourselves in here, but we're going to move on now and talk about the pros and cons for in-house. Go ahead, Deb.
Yeah, certainly the pros are absolutely, the employees work for you. So, you know who's going out there delivering. You have the ability to brand that employee. You know exactly the personality that they have, and you've got control over that individual and from a sense of how they're going to represent your brand. So, that's a huge pro on the side of in-house and being able to manage it in that fashion. So, and you also have control of what happens to your delivery. So you've got the training aspect of it. You've got the ability to make sure your packaging is right. You're keeping your hot food hot, your cold food cold. All of those things are in place. And then certainly, in-house, branding that vehicle. It's not somebody's individual car that's, driving up and down the roads. It's your brand that you're being able to use another avenue to be able to advertise that you are delivering, which is huge. Making sure that, other offices next door to wherever something's being delivered, they look out there and they see who is it that's bringing that food to this establishment. I might want to order them from them someday.
Well, the cons are sort of obvious. It's no different than the employees you have inside your restaurant. You got to hire, you got to train them. And are you qualified to train people on how to do delivery? Now you can learn, but this is a new avenue for us. And again, if you're increasing your sales by 15 to 20%, it's well worth considering trying to do this. I think that's why Panera Bread decided they want to do it in-house, because they want to control their brand experience, and they made a commitment, as was mentioned earlier, to hire 10,000 drivers. But you do have liability. You got to talk about insurance, people's driving records, criminal backgrounds, things like that. There was an unfortunate incident that happened where I don't want to name a company, but a delivery company's driver ended up shooting the guest because they got into an altercation about something to do with the delivery. Now, that's an extreme case, so I don't want to turn into a yellow journalist here, but those are the kind of things you need to think about. What could go wrong, and make sure you're taking that into consideration. So we're going to move now to start looking a little bit more of how operationally you can set yourself up to be more successful, regardless of whether it's through third-party delivery, your delivery, or even consumer pickup.
Yeah, one of the things here, when you take a look at the pickup side of it, especially with online, so a lot of restaurants are using their online platforms, and a great opportunity here is to make sure that when you're building out your restaurants or preparing your restaurants for that influx of business, having that rapid pickup area location so that people can walk in and just pick up their order and go. I recently, not long ago, we were on a project and I placed an order just to kind of check it out and see how well this brand in particular did. And, it was pretty amazing to place that order and then just be able to walk into the restaurant when you arrive and pick up your order and just walk out the door because you'd already paid for it online. But making sure that it's easily accessible for your team members to be able to put the product once it's put together. They're not having to walk halfway around the restaurant to make that happen, and then just making it convenient and visible with ease of access for the consumer as well. But something you definitely need to keep in mind if you're doing online ordering and having consumers pick it up in your restaurant.
And one of the things that we do when we work with restaurant companies that are exploring this, and we've done quite a few, is we will help them create these kind of layouts. And with a sort of a fresh set of eyes, we can look at where it makes sense for you to do this, proper signage, as you can see here, placement, accessibility, and make it easier to make the experience work out. And so I mentioned earlier the importance of to-go packaging. And here's some examples of the kind of to-go packaging that's out there. There's a lot more out there. I actually got this from a colleague of mine from Consolidated Design West to show me the kind of things that can be done for delivery. And I'm impressed by some of the things that they were able to do. And these experts are worth talking to. Don't leave it up to buying a styrofoam box from Cisco and US Food Service. That's not going to show well. You really want to recognize that this is your opportunity to brand your experience. And besides the actual packaging that's shown here, is to make sure you put some inserts in some of these bags, especially if you're using third-party deliveries. If you're doing third-party deliveries for consumer delivery, but you're choosing to do your own delivery for office deliveries, which makes a lot of sense to me. The value of those sales are much greater. It'd be $150 to $250. Some of these companies request some form of setup because they don't want to be doing that themselves. They want to leave it up to the receptionist or an administrative assistant. So there's an opportunity to grow your business. And as Deb mentioned earlier, when you're doing those deliveries, if you're smart about it and you have access to an office building, you can always bring some sample packs to drop off in other offices along the way. But I cannot overemphasize the importance of making sure that your to-go packaging can handle the rough handling by a third-party driver. They drop it, it moves around in a car somewhere, because not everyone's got the kind of equipment that you would want to have your product arrive in safely. As you can see here, some other examples of some delivery packaging. Corner Bakery does an exceptional job with their packaging. The Corner Bakery's got some locations in Los Angeles specifically that 50% of their sales come from not third-party delivery, but just delivery in general. You see here the delivery vehicles from McDonald's. I was in India a couple years ago, and McDonald's delivers French fries by bicycle. So delivery can come in many forms and fashions that goes on there. So let's move on to the next area, which has to do with technology. And this is an area that I mentioned earlier is really changing dramatically in terms of what's going on. So we know that consumers want it because it makes it easy, which forces you as a restaurant operator to say, okay, I'm going to get an app. Okay, now probably the granddaddy right now who's the biggest penetration for this is Olo, because they do a lot of online apps for companies. But they also do it in coordination with other companies that will do loyalty programs like Paytronix or Punch. Monkey Media Software also focuses primarily on catering, and they will also partner with a Paytronix or Punch to do an app as well. And the challenge you're going to have here, and I'll use some technical terms for a moment, is that because these companies are two different companies who are creating an ability for a consumer to place an order and also get some sort of rewards programs going on at the same time, it may require the consumer to log in twice, which is an issue. Anytime there's friction in experience, consumers resist it. And what you want to have is single user login. And this is coming about more and more as the technologies advance and as these companies realize that they need to be more integrated.
The reality is the bring it to me mentality, it's here to stay. It's not going away. As a matter of fact, it continues to grow every day, every year. You've seen it happen over the last 5 years, but that bring it to me mentality is just going to continue to add more vendors, add more third parties, add more consumers, add more restaurants going on to do outside ordering. So, but as I mentioned before, you've got to integrate mobile ordering with your POS system. It's critical to the successful execution of being able to deliver across the brand. And those brands that have done that are the ones that are executing and doing it very, very well. You know, third-party vendors, they're expensive, but costs are negotiable. So, you know, make sure you take the opportunity that when you're spending time with a third-party vendor, you know, make sure that you negotiate what charges you're looking for. They are expensive. You know, the average folks out there, most people are seeing that 20 to 30% when it comes to the cost for them to be able to deliver. And ultimately, you've got to make sure that you're making more money if you're going to go into this venture. So it's critical for you to be able to do that. But, you know, and then you got to double check and make sure that, you know, you're represented well from a brand standpoint. Know what the packaging is going out in the vehicles that the third parties are delivering. How are they holding up your product? You know, when you think about French fries, you know, that's one example that doesn't carry well. So you've got to make sure that you know what type packaging is out there, and how well are you branded, so that, you know, your product is ending up where you want it to be in the great way that you want it to end up in the consumer's hands. You know, in-house delivery, it can be done as long as the right standards in place. There's a lot of folks out there doing it and doing it very well, but they've also committed 100% to making that happen. All the way from training to branding of employees to vehicles and so on and so forth. So, and then, you know, make sure that if you're going to do the online ordering, that you've got those pickup points established in your restaurants, and making it easy for consumers as well as easy for your employees. You know, but ultimately, it's about convenience. The trend's going to continue to go. You've got to determine what's the right vendor for your business, weigh out the expenses, the risk to your brand, and, you know, manage it well across delivery. But ultimately, it can work great with both in-house as well as third-party delivery companies themselves.
Well, as we said, this is a very big topic, and we can go on for a long time. We wanted to give you an overview of some of the things for consideration. We do work with companies to help them implement these plans, everywhere from working with the third-party vendors to setting up the operations, looking at the go packaging, and then making sure that the staff training, which Deb mentioned earlier, is taking place, and Deb does a great job in taking care of that. So I have a couple of questions here, so let me just pull them up, and we can answer them here for you. Can you provide the slides to attendees? As we said to those of you who joined at the beginning, you will get copies of the actual webinar once we get a chance to download it and get it to you, anyone who signed up, as well as have access to it on our website. The other question we had is the conference I mentioned. It's the Food on Demand Conference. It's going to be taking place in Dallas. That will be, it's being sponsored by the people who do restaurant finance and development, the Franchise Times organization. And so you can get on through their website and figure out how you can purchase tickets. It's a day-and-a-half conference. It's going to take place coming forward here. I will get it's March, I don't have it here, March 19th and 20th in Dallas, Texas at the Renaissance Center. So hoping to do that. Another question we had, besides Olo Hudas, who just rebuilding POS integration for third-party online delivery, you can talk to Monkey Media Software. And also, as I mentioned, Checkmate is a company that, and we'll add it to pass out to people here. I'll give you the companies that we recommend, as well as the Food on Demand as links when we send out our response email. But they're also beginning to build third-party integrations. Again, this technology area is changing dramatically day by day. It changes. And so the information we're presenting today may be out of date in a few months, but we'll keep you posted as much as possible. Feel free to send any questions you have to us. Our email address are here. We're happy to just answer questions in general, see how we can provide you some help. I do want to thank Deb Jones for being a partner in this presentation today. I hope you found this worthwhile and exciting, and be on the lookout for our next webinar coming up soon, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.